Finding the right staff and talent has got to be a top 3 challenge for any company. And the days of an employee, especially young employees, staying with the company for many years seems to be the exception, not the rule. These challenges of finding and retaining leaders is more exacerbated with Gen Z, who are those who graduated in the past 5 to 6 years from college. Join me and my guest, Tom Pagano, co-founder and president of Mission Advantage, as we discuss 7 keys for hiring and retaining Gen Z employees. Welcome to the Catholic Entrepreneur Podcast. Welcome again to the Catholic Entrepreneur. Our sponsor today is Ave Maria University. Your child or grandchild will thrive at Ave Maria. Located in southern Florida, students receive a world-class education and an extraordinary formation in faith, virtue, and life. 3 of my children have attended Ave Maria, and we could not be more pleased. Learn more at avemaria.edu. My guest today is Tom Pagano. He's the co-founder and president of Mission Advantage. Tom's a 12-year veteran of philanthropy and nonprofit management. He works with dioceses and prominent Catholic nonprofits, helping them solve their management-level staffing needs. Tom, great to have you with us.
Thanks, Matt. It's great to be here.
Tom, when you and I did a pre-interview a couple of months ago talking about this topic of recruiting, employing, this is what you do for a living, you were pretty quick to hone in on this topic, the keys of hiring and retaining Gen Z employees. Why did this come to mind so quickly?
It's what everyone's talking about. We work with, hundreds of organizations looking to hire, each year, and it's leaders, hiring managers are trying to figure out, how to attract, Gen Z talent and almost more importantly, how to retain them. By 2030, 30% of the workforce will be Gen Z. And a recent survey, 75% of business leaders report that they have a challenge managing Gen Z. So there's clearly something going on here. It's new. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's thinking about it.
Okay, let's define Gen Z first for the audience if they're not familiar. And then I want to jump into what some of those challenges are, why this is front of mind.
Exactly. So Gen Z, and depending kind of where you look, but it's about people born from 1997 to 2012. So they would fall in the age range of 12 years old to 27 years old. So when you're looking at the workforce, the last 5 years of new folks into the workforce would be Gen Z, college students. So, over the next 10 years, they're going to be kind of that first third of the workforce.
So why is this front of mind? What are the HR managers? What are the bosses? What are they saying? Why is this an issue in the most macro sense?
We're seeing a few challenges here. One, just where they're physically working. I mean, there's a great demand, and we're seeing this across the workforce, for remote work, for hybrid work, but particularly in the Gen Z generation. So starting there, I mean, where does this person sit? They're looking for, they're motivated by and incentivized by different things, attention, reward, perks, some different elements that or other generations are maybe less motivated by or incentivized by. So, and the list goes on, but there's kind of this different way of working, with this generation we're finding, and it needs to be figured out because we need them in the workforce. The organization, needs this demographic. So we got to figure it out.
Tom, is the issue with Gen Z more one of finding them for positions or retaining them in positions?
Yeah, so I would say, Matt, it's certainly retaining and it's attracting. So not as much finding, but it's attracting them. So what does the organization offer? What does the work environment look like? It's those types of things that Gen Z has, specific requirements, you might call it. About 50% of Gen Z would look at the social stances that their company takes when considering accepting a job with them. 65% of Gen Z requires a hybrid environment in order to
Wow.
take a job. So a few days remote, few days in the office. And again, this list goes on, but there's specific things that they're looking for that an employer has to figure out how to provide or how to accommodate, if they want to successfully, attract them to the organization and then retain them. 40% of Gen Z has a job for less than 2 years. So a high turnover rate in that generation. So it's something.
Some people may say, "Well, listen, I don't want to deal with this issue," but you're saying no. It's coming. It's not only present now, but in a matter of a half dozen years, it's going to be a sizable percentage of the workforce. So we need to figure out how to navigate this. So, Tom, lest someone think that we're just piling on Gen Z, let's talk about their gifts, because clearly there are gifts. In fact, if you don't mind, I'll just interject before the question. Maybe 10 years ago, when I was running Ascension, it dawned on me, due to the gifts that were coming, the young people that were coming into the door and how they saw the world, that, oh my goodness, we need to have a steady dose of this. And I just remember a turn of phrase I either jokingly or seriously said to one of my staff, that we need a steady stream every year of 23-year-olds coming through the door. So let's talk about the giftedness first, and then maybe a little bit more time on some of the challenges, because we need to know how to navigate those. But what are the giftedness that you see from Gen Z?
There is something to kind of that the new crop of talent in a workforce. Those early 20 somethings, no matter what generation they came from. I think they have energy, they have vision, they're idealistic in a healthy way. I mean, there's just something about that every organization loves to capture and to kind of bottle up. So to start, there's just something about the youth. Gen Z is incredible with technology, as we know. I think I got my first iPhone at 22, 23 years old. I mean, this generation grew up, with this technology right at their fingertips. They're disrupting the workforce, I think, in a good way. Some of these ideas, I mean, they're not all bad, obviously, and I think they are warranted in many ways. So thinking about, remote work, or what an office environment looks like, or work-life balance, mental health, kind of these things that we're talking a lot about with Gen Z, I think is disruptive in a good way. Of course, social media, kind of the influencer culture, there's something that organizations, can learn there, from a marketing perspective, from an influence and a brand perspective. And they certainly bring a lot of that. So certainly a tremendous amount of gifts and benefits they bring to an organization.
Yeah, Tom, I mean, the words that you're speaking totally echo my experience in the last 10 years during my time at Ascension. Some of the greatest creations that came, senior management was overseeing them, but it was our younger hires who were coming up with things. For example, the whole Father Mike phenomena and Ascension Presents, and those were creations of our young people, let alone the social media dominance that followed. Tom, let's take a step back and talk about hiring in general, because just kind of noodling on these things, the stakes are pretty high. So two questions. They're maybe flip sides of the same coin. What is the cost associated in either dollars or time or both in finding key talent? And then what is the cost, again, in the broad sense of the word, in needing to replace talent? Therefore, this is why you want to retain employees. Can you comment on both of those?
It really is an investment of dollars and time. So starting with the second question first, I mean, there's better data there. The average cost to losing an employee is estimated to be about 2 times their annual salary, and that goes. You think about the time that everybody put into hiring this person, onboarding them, training them, working with them. They leave. It's gone, poof, it's done. And then you need to go through the whole process again of finding their replacement. So time, energy, resources. And then if you're using a recruiting firm, I mean, usually between 25 and 35% of the first year's salary, is the going rate for recruiters. You have job postings on top of that. So there's a ton of cost, as well as time, resources, energy into hiring the right people.
Tom, you put together for us 7 keys for retaining and finding Gen Z employees. What I'd like to do is, can you quickly rattle them off? And then we're going to double back and unpack each of them individually, because from what I saw, they're really rich. So maybe start out with that, and we'll go from there.
So the 7 keys are these: mission, compensation, strategic work environment, career growth opportunities, culture, measurable success expectations, and perks.
Okay, a couple of those jumped out in particular. The culture issue is always big. Compensation, of course, is big. What I want to do is I want to address each of them individually, but we're going to take a quick break first for a word from our sponsor, and then we'll come back with Tom Pagano, where we're addressing this question of Gen Z. They're both gifted, but also there are some challenges, and we're going to see what is best in both recruiting and retaining Gen Z employees, and we'll be back in just a few seconds.
With an authentically Catholic curriculum that includes 35 majors such as business, pre-nursing, biology, and psychology, alongside personal and professional formation, internships, and more, Ave Maria University equips students to bring their faith, knowledge, and leadership to the world. To learn more, visit avemaria.edu.
So welcome back. We're with Tom Pagano from Mission Advantage. Mission Advantage is a firm that focuses on hiring key employees, management, senior level employees for nonprofit organizations. But Tom has a whole bunch of experience in the nonprofit world and the philanthropy world. So Tom, again, great to be with you. So Tom, before our break, you've rattled off 7 keys for recruiting and retaining Gen Z employees. Let's go through the first one. You spoke about mission. What do you mean with mission? Why is it important in the mind of the Gen Z employee?
Yeah, exactly. So, what we're seeing in Gen Z is, perhaps in many cases, they're less excited about a job for the job's sake, and they're really motivated by the mission of the organization. What is this company, this organization doing? What's the impact it's having on the world? 71% of Gen Z would say they would take a pay cut in order to work for a mission that they're personally passionate about. So, that's pretty telling. That's a large percent of that demographic saying, money is, compensation is king, but I would consider, a little bit less if I loved what I was doing. And now mission, again, our firm works primarily with nonprofits, and mission is typically very clear there. But in the private sector too, Matt, there's, mission-oriented companies in the private sector, but we're also seeing companies, Chick-fil-A is an easy example where their values, their larger mission, even though they're, a fast food company making chicken sandwiches. So this type of thing, whether, it's an explicit mission, the product of the organization, or just kind of the values, or just kind of a larger but less tangible mission, Gen Z is definitely looking for that.
Tom, we hosted an HR professional many years ago at Ascension, and he pointed out this fact that the dollar amounts are important, but that only goes so far. It's other things. And it made me think, why is that the case? And I almost wonder, and, it's not essential necessarily to know this, but I almost wonder whether that's a fruit of an affluent culture, meaning my dad probably was just glad to have a job, and then his kids did a little bit better, and now presumably my kids are doing a little bit better, so they can be more discriminating. Have you ever thought about maybe what is at the root of this particular kind of appetite or need on the part of Gen Z?
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm not a sociologist or psychologist, but Matt, my theory is the same as yours. I think, right, my grandfather, they're first generation, and they just had to find a way to make it work. And then, I think with the baby boomers and my parents' generation, there was more of a mindset of, you work hard, you put in your time, and you're grateful for that. You get a gold watch one day, maybe, and you're happy with it. But times have been pretty well, in America for several decades now. The economy, is good. The past 8 years, unemployment's been under 5%, with the exception of that little blip with COVID. And that's the work environment that Gen Z knows, So I think there is an abundance of options, and maybe it allows, the generation to be a little more picky, a little more thoughtful selective with where they want to give their time.
Okay, so mission is key, even if it's a secular mission, if it's a mission that they can relate to or kind of resonates with their heart and their mind, it's going to be helpful. The second item, and again, these were in no particular order from what you shared with me, but the issue of compensation. What is the challenge? What is the opportunity? What are you saying here?
Salary still is king, and Gen Z would list salary as the most important aspect of a job, although it's the least important than it is for any other generation. So it's still king, but perhaps holds less water than some of the other generations. And so I might speak specifically to nonprofit leaders here for a minute. Matt, you've worked in the church for years, so you understand. It is so challenging to keep our salaries competitive in the nonprofit space when we're working for a mission, and we all know the reasons why, but it really is just so important to be able to have a competitive compensation package. Certainly if you're a for-profit company, but I think particularly for mission-based companies and nonprofit organizations, and we see it every day. Great talent who would love to work for a mission in the nonprofit space, but just kind of can't make that adjustment. I think there always is going to have to be some sacrifice from the talents side to work for mission. But the more we can kind of bridge that gap and encourage organizations to be competitive is just so critical.
On another program, Tom, with someone who is involved with a nonprofit, his contention is that we really need to move with a for-profit mentality as nonprofits. Yeah. And I got to tell you, in my 30 plus years in working in this world, we are clearly getting better in all of those areas, including Absolutely. The salary issue. And frankly, we need to. And anyone really in the church who has an issue with someone working for a nonprofit and doing well, I would say, listen, this is what it takes if we want to be excellent. And so I know you know that, but it's good for ministry heads to be reminded of that we really need to be competitive. Tom, a third item you mentioned is strategic environment. What are you saying here?
Yeah, so we touched on this earlier, Matt, but where people are physically sitting when they work, are they at home? Are they in an office? Are they in a co-working space? Whatever it is. So an interesting stat: 16% of the workforce. So this is the entire workforce, all generations. 16% will consider a job if it's fully on site. So essentially, you're cutting out 84% of the workforce if you're saying,
"Wow,
I want my team in the office 5 days a week." That's significant, and it really is something I think every leader in an organization needs to think about. 65% prefer a hybrid environment, meaning 2 or 3 days in the office, 2 or 3 days at home. So they're not quite looking for fully remote and don't just kind of want to be in their apartment separated from their team. They do see value in being in person, being around a table with their team, FaceTime with their boss, but they want that flexibility. So I think as organizations, we have to adjust here and figure out, how do we make this work, for our company, for our business, but also make it reasonable for the talent so that we can attract the talent that we want. We're a boutique recruiting firm. We have 16, full-time employees. We've made the decision that, our team is remote. And there's people in hubs that work in co-working space, but we're remote, and we're really trying to figure out, what are the parameters around that? How do you have a healthy culture? How many times a year do you have to be together? So it takes some creativity, and it's art and science, but that's kind of the lane that we chose. So I think every leader in every company needs to give that careful thought.
It seems as if, of course, during COVID, but then immediately following, it was really getting dictated to company owners and leadership. But the pendulum usually swings back. Where do you think we are on this question in 2 years or 5 years?
Yeah, personally, Matt, I think it's here to stay for a long time. And maybe this comes from our team talks to thousands of candidates that are job seeking every day. everybody wants remote flexibility or some kind of hybrid environment. It's just everyone across the board. There's such a strong preference and demand for it. I just can't see it swinging back, at least anytime soon. All over the news is, Amazon just announced that starting January, they're going to require everyone in the office 5 days. And there's tons of pushback on that, and everybody's talking about it. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes with Amazon. But I just can't see it, swinging all the way back the way it was, a few decades ago, anytime soon.
Sure. Okay, so by way of recap, you said mission is important. Of course, the compensation question, strategic environment. Number 4, career growth opportunities. I think I can guess what this means, but what does this issue mean and why is this important?
Yeah, exactly, Matt. So when we're, interviewing candidates for a role, we always ask, why are you interested in leaving your current role and why did you leave your past roles? One of the top answers across the board is I hit a ceiling. And people want to grow. They want to advance in their careers. They want to know, what's next? What do I need to do to get there? What does that look like? So things like title, things like responsibilities, adding management responsibilities, overseeing a budget, these growth opportunities to advance, to learn more, to take on more responsibility is extremely meaningful, and talent's looking for it. And this is good news, Matt. We talked about salary and compensation, and sometimes it's challenging, to really be competitive. Sometimes, a slightly higher title, more responsibilities, the opportunity to manage a team for the first time, this really carries a lot of weight with people. So I think as leaders, we have to, when we're hiring for a position, we almost have to think 1 or 2 steps ahead. Where can this person grow into? What does the next role look like? What is that opportunity? And making it very clear, to our employees, what that looks like.
2 questions related to that. Is this issue of career growth opportunities, is it more prevalent in the Gen Z, millennial, than prior generations, or maybe the opposite? And then secondly, this is a little bit of a hot button, because I think I've heard this, that Gen Z, and again, the group before, they might be expecting to progress faster than their skill set warrants. So two big questions there.
Yeah, so I think this is true across the board. I just think good talent is always looking for, advancement. So we're seeing this with candidates at all different parts of their career. So certainly not unique to Gen Z. But I would agree with you, Matt. I think Gen Z probably has less patience, for putting in their time and just kind of, doing the grind, while they, accumulate more, more credentials, more skill sets to grow. Perhaps they want it a little bit sooner. But yeah, I think this is true just, in human persons and just ambitious individuals.
So number 5 of 7, culture. Again, I think I can guess at least some aspects of it, but what are you saying? What are you seeing in your unique position of interviewing both employers and so many employees?
Business 101, a healthy culture is absolutely, key for hiring and retaining good talent. So I'm not a culture expert. I'd kind of refer people to Pat Lencioni or so many of the other thought leaders. But as a leader, I think really being objective and honest about what is the culture of our company. What is the culture of our organization? Is it healthy? Are we retaining talent successfully? Are we getting referrals, because we have such a great culture? Like, hey, you got to work here. You got to work at this company. If the culture is not healthy, there's just going to be a revolving door with talent. So of course, everybody's trying to, find a healthy work environment, and you have a better chance of retaining good talent if the culture is healthy.
So let me ask the question really that I've asked a few times already. Is culture more important to Gen Z than prior generations? I know it's important, but it really, so I'm 35 plus years in the work world, and some of those early organizations, I'm not even sure if the word existed,
Sure.
in any tangible way. It really seems to have become much more prevalent beginning maybe about 20 years ago. Is this more of an issue? I would guess so, for Gen Z than maybe the older workers, or no, has it now become key for everyone?
I think with Gen Z, we're seeing less tolerance, for an unhealthy culture. So In my research here, I found this interesting stat that 40% of Gen Z would leave a job without having another one lined up, and that might seem crazy to, to many of us listening here. But I think there's probably less patience, less tolerance for, an unhealthy culture or a toxic culture than maybe, other generations where you just kind of grin and bear it, that type of thing. But again, I would say this is mostly across the board. We just need a healthy culture to hire and retain good talent.
Number 6, measurable success expectations. Unpack why, with Gen Z in particular, this is an item that made your shortlist.
When we're interviewing candidates who are looking for another role, another top reason is because the expectations that the company has put on me are just outrageous. They're completely unattainable. Nobody can reach them. Nobody wants to be in that environment. People want to win. People want to meet expectations. They want to, close the laptop at the end of a day or a week and know that they did good work and they're meeting all expectations. So I think designing positions in that way, as leaders, is so critical. If we're thinking about sales, we all have goals, we all have dreams, and there is something to, I think, driving hard and setting a high bar to reach. But if folks are kind of missing goals that are somewhat arbitrary, or maybe it can be healthy, profitable for the organization just to lower it so a higher percentage of salespeople are hitting it. I think it's something to really think about. And obviously, this goes outside of producer environments. No matter what function of the organization that you're in, to know what's expected of me. Am I meeting it or not? For that to be clearly communicated is so key. When goals are outrageous, they're unattainable, or things are ambiguous, it really frustrates employees, and we're seeing that a lot.
So number 7 for Gen Z, perks. Define it in the broad sense of the word, and then are we talking about specific perks that this generation is keenly interested in?
This is an interesting one, Matt. So perks I would define as non-cash related benefits to working at an organization. So we're talking here about a company car, or unlimited PTO, or unlimited snacks in the office, and there's more. I mean, there's professional development, having a career mentor, there's tuition, kind of payback plans that companies are offering, all types of things. But Gen Z, would list perks high on their list, of things to look for in a company. People like to be able to tell stories at a bar about, there's a ping pong table at my office, or we get this, we get unlimited PTO, whatever. But I think as leaders, I think 2 things. One, it's just, if this is important to this generation, I think we have to be looking at it and thinking about it. So maybe it's not important to us. It hasn't been important to our company, but if it is important to this generation, how do we accommodate that and kind of cater to it? But 2, I think it could be a benefit. Again, we're talking about compensation and salary, how important that is. $5,000 in salary, perhaps that money can be spent, in perks and create even more goodwill or more benefits through, XYZ, type of offerings. So I think it may allow a sweeter package, that doesn't just come down to cash or money.
So we've gone through these 7. I can see a ministry leader, I can see a secular business owner understanding the 7 keys that you put forth that you think are very important to Gen Z. I also can see them struggling because they have to manage a business. They're managing many things. Some of these things come with added costs. And so they're probably hearing this and thinking, yeah, but what about the other side? What about the leader, the owner of the business? So what words can you give them to help them understand either, tough, this is needed, or no, some reasonable pushback can happen? What would you say to them?
I totally understand, where leaders are coming from, who kind of scratch their head or have a hard time believing this. I think it's important to remember that, an engaged employee is the most productive employee. If somebody is disengaged or lukewarm in their workplace, And there's data all about this. You're going to lose a ton of productivity. So these little things, just kind of being creative, being innovative, it will improve engagement, which ultimately does improve productivity. I mean, I think it might be somewhat of a crooked line, to getting there, but it's what we have to at least consider. I don't want to make perks sound like it's only company cars or, unlimited snacks or unlimited PTO. A lot of organizations or maybe a ministry can't do this, but, maybe it's the ability to take, a day a quarter or a day a half to, volunteer at your kid's school or to volunteer at the parish or the soup kitchen, or, you can go on retreat, once a year without having to take, paid time off, whatever it is. I think there's a lot of creative ways to do this. We just worked with a great Catholic apostolate who they allow for, I believe it was 30 minutes each day, kind of during work hours for, spiritual reading, prayer, just to kind of orient yourself at the start of the day. And those were, part of work hours. So you can be really creative with this. But I think it's important that everyone's thinking about, what is the talent that we're targeting? What do they want? And how do we cater to that while still meeting company goals?
So, Tom, maybe two final questions. What would you say to the Gen Z employee who is hearing what you're sharing and agreeing probably wholeheartedly, but what would you say to them in terms of increasing their understanding of what the leader of the ministry or business is going through, and maybe how they can also try and find some middle ground as well? What would you say to them?
Yeah, that's a great question, Matt. I would encourage Gen Z to be open-minded about this too, from the other side. Maybe seek out mentors or seek out leaders that they trust to kind of hear the other side of this. Gen Z, you're kind of reading these articles, you're seeing your peers demand all these things in the workplace that are very new, they're very different. I think there is some risk to that, and if you're one of those 40% that are thinking about leaving your job without having another one lined up, I would encourage you to raise some caution there. So, I think being open-minded, really seeing or hearing, from other generations and those with some more wisdom or experience in the workplace to kind of round out your opinion. I think that's really important, Matt, and I'm glad you asked that question.
And Tom, the last question then again is to ministry leaders or business owners. Why this type of attentiveness? Again, the cost of finding, the cost of recruiting, and the fact that we're going to be facing, a workforce that has perspectives.
In 5 years, 30% of the workforce is going to be Gen Z. They're also going to be at the lower end of the pay scale, which every business leader knows you need those employees that are early in their career and are at the lower end of the pay scale. Gen Z, this young generation, they bring so much innovation, so many gifts, so many talents, so many perspectives that are tremendous assets to an organization. So I would encourage leaders, to really at least raise this question, think about it. How are we operating as an organization? Again, whether it's perks, whether it's the remote work thing, whether it's how mission oriented or our social stances, whatever it is, that the list that Gen Z is looking for in a way that might be somewhat different or uncomfortable for us. But I think that question just needs to be asked.
Sure. I mean, Tom, no doubt some of the statistics you gave in terms of the cost of finding an initial staff member and then retaining them were substantial. So that reason alone, let alone the whole Catholic instinct that I know you have, that I have, that we want to create harmonious relationships with our staff. So clearly. Well, Tom Pagano, thank you for your input on these questions, the initial suggestion of the 7 keys. We appreciate that. Thanks to Tom, we created a handout for you as well, as we often do on the Catholic Entrepreneur Podcast. So you can see in the show notes, you can download that 7 keys to successful hiring and retaining Gen Z employees. But Tom Pagano, thanks for being Mission Advantage. You're doing great work.
Thanks, Matt. Great to be here. Appreciate the invite.
Very good. See you, Tom. So as I shared in the beginning, launching a venture is fabulous. It's wonderful in so many ways, but it comes with challenges, one of which is, again, this staffing question. But Tom Pagano, really, to me, hopefully you, gave a lot of great information. We're giving that information, as we often do, in the form of a PDF handout. You can just look in the show notes and look for the document, 7 Keys to Successfully Hiring and Retaining Gen Z Employees. Thank you for following us. Be sure to like us on whichever platform you watch the show. Thank you for joining us. We will see you on the next episode of The Catholic Entrepreneur.